So hey guys, welcome back to another video of Just Medical Stuff, and today we'll be talking about another important topic called as diabetes type 2. So what occurs actually in diabetes type 2 is that in a patient of diabetes mellitus there is insulin resistance. So in this insulin resistance, the insulin level can either be high or it can be normal. But the problem is that it cannot act. It fails to act on the GLUT4 receptors, on the insulin receptors. So this occurs due to downregulation of the insulin receptors. Now, why do these receptors undergo downregulation? This can be due to many causes. It can be due to obesity. Now, I told you that insulin resistance occurs in a patient of diabetes type 2. So, what are the main things responsible for insulin resistance? So one thing we have here is resistant hormone. The other thing we have is adipokines, a high level of adipokines. One more thing here is a decreased level of adiponectin. So what do these adipokines actually do? These adipokines, they cause weight gain. They promote weight gain. And adiponectin on the other hand, they do not allow a person to gain weight. That is, they keep the weight of a person in control. They guard against obesity. Now if I tell you about the details of this resistant hormone, you have to understand 4 points over here. This resistant hormone, what it does is that it induces the gluconeogenesis in the liver. It induces hepatic gluconeogenesis. It causes expression of inflammatory cytokines like tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin 6, which can cause chronic inflammation. One more thing it does is that it decreases the activity of the glucose transporters. The glucose transporter on the beta cells is our GLUT4 receptor. So it decreases the activity of these glucose transporters. One more thing it does is that we have certain genes which decrease the level of insulin. Now this high resistin, it increases the activity of these gene suppressors which decrease the activity of insulin. So these are the four things which a high resistant molecule can actually do, a high resistant hormone can actually do, which can further lead to increased level of glucose in a patient, and the patient will finally end up with diabetes type 2. So to be clear, let me explain you a bit over here also, that we have a patient with type 2 diabetes, the adipose tissue which acts on the adipose tissue of the patient has high amount of resistin and a low amount of adiponectin, which can lead to insulin resistance in a patient. The patient can have vascular inflammation due to interleukin 6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. And one very important thing here is that we can have lipid metabolic disorders, which can cause cardiovascular complications like atherosclerosis. Now, what happens in atherosclerosis is that suppose this is the blood vessel. This is the blood vessel. In atherosclerosis, there can be formation of plaques over here, which can hinder the flow of blood. So there can be a high risk of heart failure in these patients with atherosclerosis. One more complication we can have over here is we can have diabetic retinopathy. Now this diabetic retinopathy can further cause blindness. So this was about the mechanism of causing insulin resistance in a patient with diabetes type 2. I can explain again a bit over here that suppose this is a normal adipocyte of a patient and the person had overnutrition, the person had metabolic syndrome, or the person has some genetic abnormality which led to obesity. Now the person is obese, more susceptible to diabetes type 2. So the patient will have decreased level of adiponectin hormone, increased level of leptin, increased level of these tumor markers in interleukin 6 and TNF alpha, which can lead to inflammation and again cause atherosclerosis due to lipid deposition and also insulin resistance. So these three hormones are resistin, adipokines and adiponectin. Resistin is an hormone over here. Adipokine and adiponectin are certain substances which can further lead to insulin resistance in a patient. So this was all about the insulin resistance topic. Now let us start with the cause of diabetes type 2. So there can be certain factors which can cause diabetes type 2 in a patient. It can be due to a high BP, it can be due to pancreatic diseases, it can be due to obesity, due to increased age, due to genetic predisposition, due to stress, due to a sedentary lifestyle, unhealthy food, a large amount of oily food, sugars, carbs, and everything, and certain medicines can also cause diabetes type 2. Now let us go with the symptoms. I told you earlier there are three main classical symptoms of diabetes: polyuria, polydipsia, and a weight loss. Even here we can have increased thirst, that is the person drinks a lot of water, polydipsia, unexplained weight loss, increased hunger, polyphagia, fatigue in the patient will get tired very soon, slow healing in the patient, numbness in the hands or in the feet, blurred vision in the patient, frequent urination, polyuria, and a dry skin. There can be many other symptoms. The patient can also have UTIs and many other things. I have listed a few points over here. Now let us go with the treatment option. Now, if a patient with diabetes comes to you, what is the first thing you will do in a patient? The first thing you have to do in a patient with diabetes is that control their diet. You have to tell them to regulate the amount of carbs intake. You have to like motivate them to go for exercises, because if you exercise there will be increase in your GLUT4 receptors, which can promote the entry of sugar in the muscles, which can keep your sugar levels into control. So exercise and diet control is very important in diabetes type 2. Now these things were not to be noted in diabetes type 1. In type 2 they are extremely important. And then you can finally give them OHAs, which are oral hypoglycemic drugs, which can control the HbA1c levels. So I told you earlier that this HbA1c, it can control the glucose level of a patient, or it can tell you about the glucose level of a patient for 3 months. So this oral hypoglycemic drugs, they can tell you about the glucose level of the patient for 3 months. So this was all about the initial treatment for diabetes type 2. Now we have to start with the drugs used in diabetes. So the first thing you have to listen over here is the class of drugs called as biguanides. Now what do these biguanides actually do? They inhibit the hepatic gluconeogenesis. They inhibit the formation of glucose in the liver. Now if you remember, what was this resistant actually doing? This resisting was inducing hepatic gluconeogenesis. And for the treatment, this class of drugs called as biguanides, they decrease the hepatic gluconeogenesis in the patient. And one more thing these drugs do is that they decrease the HbA1c level by 1 to 2.5% by 3 to 6 months. But they are slow acting. Now, one drug in biguanides is metformin. Now, what you should remember about metformin is that these should not be given in a patient with kidney disease. In a patient with nephropathy, these drugs should not be given. So the drug of choice of an obese patient without nephropathy is metformin, but the drug of choice of a patient who is actually obese with type 2 diabetes mellitus and nephropathy is linagliptin, glipizide, or tolbutamide. I'll talk about all these drugs in details later on in this video, but now just remember that we do not give biguanide metformin in a patient with nephropathy. Now this nephropathy can occur if a person takes metformin and is having nephropathy. It can also cause lactic acidosis in a patient. A few other side effects is nausea, vomiting, and B12 deficiency. Now, what is this lactic acidosis? In decreased amount of O2, our body produces lactate. And in lactic acidosis, this lactate gets accumulated in our body. So, metformin again can also cause lactic acidosis in a patient with nephropathy. Now, one more class of drugs we have here are our sulfonylureas. So, what these sulfonylureas actually do? These sulfonylureas, they decrease your HbA1c level to 1.5 percentage. But they can cause side effect of hypoglycemia. An example of sulfonylurea is your glipizide drug. One more class we have over here is alpha glucosidase inhibitors. Now these alpha glucoside inhibitors, we have two drugs over here. We have acarbose and we have voglibose. They are taken with the meals and they decrease the absorption of glucose from your GIT. But one thing to be noted here is that they can cause osmotic diarrhea. But one benefit is that they can control your postprandial spikes. So what does this postprandial mean? It means after meals. After a heavy meal, after a heavy carb meal, you can have high level of glucose in your body. So these drugs, alpha glucosidase inhibitors, they can control postprandial spikes and they decrease the HbA1c level by 0.5 percentage. We have one more drug over here, which is on our meglitide. The drug used in this class is repaglinide. These drugs, they behave like sulfonylureas, but they have a high insulinogenic action. They can cause a burst of insulin into your circulation. They can cause a burst of insulin in your circulation, but the thing to be noted is that they have a shorter half-life. They can increase the sensitivity of glucose, but they have a very short half-life, and they have another side effect of hypoglycemia. Another group of drug we have is thiazolidinediones. Now these drugs, they have failed their fourth level of test. They have failed their grade 4 test because these drugs, pioglitazone and rosiglitazone, they can cause bladder cancer and CHF. Now just imagine a patient coming to you with for the treatment of diabetes type 2 and ends up getting bladder cancer or CHF. The patient will come and kill you first of all. And one benefit we had with these drugs was that they decreased the HbA1c level by 1%. But they're not used nowadays due to their side effects. They're not used. So now another class of drugs we have are our DPP inhibitors. So what do these DPP inhibitors actually do? These DPP inhibitors, they inhibit the degradation of GLP-1 and GIP. These GLP-1 and GIP, they increase the level of insulin. They increase the level of insulin. That is why we inhibit DPP, which is actually causing the degradation of these, so that insulin level will be able to increase. Now these drugs, they end with the word gliptins. We have sitagliptin, linagliptin, vildagliptin and saxagliptin. Linagliptin, you can remember by the word L, it is metabolized by liver, and sitagliptin, it is metabolized by kidney. So we cannot give sitagliptin in a patient with nephropathy because it is metabolized by kidney and there can be toxicity if we give these drugs to the patient. But we can give linagliptin because it is metabolized by liver. It is like perfectly safe in a patient with kidney disease. Now we have one more class of drugs called as liraglutide and exenatide. These drugs also, they are GLP-1 agonists. GLP again increases insulin. So these drugs can also be effective for treatment. We have one more drug called as pramlintide. This is actually an amylin agonist. I told you that from the pancreatic cells, beta pancreatic cells, we have insulin, C-peptide and amylin release. Now this amylin is actually a pancreatic hormone and it decreases the uptake of glucose from the GIT. We had one more drug, our alpha we had one more drug, our alpha glucosidase inhibitors, which was also decreasing the absorption of glucose from the GIT. In a similar way, pramlintide was also causing the decreased uptake of glucose from GIT, and it prevents postprandial hypoglycemia. That is a hyperglycemia caused after a high carb meal. These drugs can be used for that case. Now, one more thing to be noted is that this pramlintide can be used for both type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus. Now, one more drug which is very, very important over here is SGLT2 inhibitor because it was asked recently in FMGE Jan 2024. This question was asked about SGLT2 inhibitors. What do these drugs actually do? They prevent the absorption of glucose in the kidneys. That is all that glucose, that means that all that glucose will go in the urine. So there will be a high amount of glucose in the urine. So that can cause a side effect of urinary tract infections. These drugs, they have their ending with gliflozin. We have canagliflozin, dapagliflozin and empagliflozin. Even in the exam, they ask the question that which drugs can cause a high level of UTIs in the patient. And there were many options. One of them was empagliflozin. That was the answer. And one more thing is that these drugs can be used in the place of metformin also. So this was all about the different type of drugs used in diabetes. So now let us start finally with the treatment guidelines of diabetes mellitus type 2. Now, if the HbA1c level of your patient is more than 9, then you have to directly go for insulin. Before giving the OHAs, you have to go for insulin to control the glucose level. But if the HbA1c level of the patient is less than 7, then you can use your OHAs. But if it is not controlled, again you have to go for insulin. So the normal HbA1c level of a patient, it should be less than 5.6, and in a patient of diabetes mellitus, it should be less than 6.5. So if the HbA1c level of a patient is more than 9, go directly for insulin. If the HbA1c level of a patient is less than 7, then go for OHAs. But if OHAs are not able to control, go for insulin directly. Now this chart over here, this is very important, very, very important in this video, the most important part. So if a patient with diabetes comes to you, what do you have to give the patient first of all? First of all, you have to ask the patient to go for lifestyle modification. That is, control your diet, go for exercises, and along with these things, just give metformin for 3 months. And then after 3 months, check the HbA1c level. If it is controlled, then well and good. If it is not controlled, if it is more than 7, then you have to add one more OHA, which can either be gliptins or sulfonylureas or GLP-1 agonists. Now you have to give these drugs again for 3 months and then check the HbA1c level again. So in total, we gave 6 months to the patient. We gave 6 months to the patient to control their HbA1c level. Now, if again after 6 months the HbA1c level of the person is still high, more than 7, then you have to add one more OHA. That is, you have to give 2 OHA with metformin again for 3 months. And then after 3 months, again check for HbA1c level. But this time, after 9 months now, after 9 months, if still the HbA1c level is not normal, then you can consider this case as a drug-resistant diabetes mellitus. And for the treatment of drug-resistant diabetes mellitus, you have to go with insulin infusion. So once drug-resistant diabetes mellitus is diagnosed, go with insulin. These OHAs, they won't work. So this was all about the treatment guidelines of diabetes mellitus, and I have spoken about everything you need to know about diabetes, and I hope this was helpful. I'll be making another video on MODY and the complications of diabetes later on, but till then, please keep studying, and if you want to get your concepts cleared on diabetes type 1.5 and diabetes type 1, then please do watch my previous videos. And thank you for watching today's video.